The day after our wedding, Aiden and Helen started ignoring me. Even after half a year, the situation hadn't changed, and I was in despair when one day I got a call from Helen during work. After ignoring me for 6 months, what could she possibly want now? I was angry, but in case it was an emergency, I decided to answer.
I fell down the stairs and hurt my back. Call an ambulance now.
Frustrated, I called for the ambulance for her. Then I received a call from Aiden.
Go to the hospital with Mom. She fractured her lower back.
They decided not to operate and treat her at home.
Quit your job and take care of Mom.
You should be the one looking after her. She's your mom.
It's the daughter-in-law's duty to take care of the mother-in-law.
This is ridiculous. I'm not some free servant. I applied for a week's vacation, packed my things, and moved into a serviced apartment. Seething with anger, I made a vow to myself. Aiden and Helen, you'll both pay for trampling on my feelings and treating me like this. I'm Kate, a 42-year-old housewife. I've been married to Aiden for 6 months. We met at a singles event hosted by a cooking class. Aiden isn't much of a cook, but he's hardworking and serious about his job. Having lost my dad in my 20s, I felt a connection with Aiden, who also lost his dad at a young age. After a year of dating, our marriage was quickly arranged. When I met Helen, Aiden's mom, she seemed friendly and easygoing. I also got along well with his sister, Hillary, and I had high hopes for our future life together. But right after we got engaged, Helen showed her true colors. Through Aiden, Helen expressed her concerns.
I've lived with my son for so long. I'll feel lonely if he leaves. Can I move in with you?
In short, she was pushing for us to live together. Unlike me, who moved to New York for college and started living alone, Aiden had stayed at home with Helen after his dad passed away. Right after proposing to me, Aiden said, I want to get used to living together before we get married. So we started living together at my place. I wasn't living in an apartment. It was the house my mom's family had owned. When I decided to move to New York, I had it renovated and then inherited it.
I'll bring Mom here too. We're going to live together eventually. So whether we do it now or later doesn't really matter, right?
I had prepared myself for the possibility of this happening someday, but the way he said it so casually really bothered me. Still, I didn't want to stir up trouble before our wedding, so I let it slide.
We'll have Mom live downstairs. It's not a two-family home, but there's a bathroom and a small kitchen upstairs. There's plenty of space.
It feels spacious now, but once we have 2 kids, this house will feel cramped. I tried to gently object, but Aiden didn't care and went ahead with plans to move Helen in. Soon after, Helen sold her house and moved into ours. Then she started acting like it was her own home. I'd come home from work to find her sitting in the upstairs living room, snacking and watching TV, as if it were a regular occurrence. Both Aiden and I worked full-time, so we agreed to only have meals together on weekends. We had decided to only eat together on weekends. Even though we agreed on that, Helen never cooked for herself and always expected me to do it.
Hey, is dinner ready yet? I'm starving.
We'd wait for Aiden to come home, and as the 3 of us ate together, Helen would criticize my housekeeping every time.
Kate, I noticed some soap scum in the bathtub, and the towels were wrinkled too. You shouldn't slack off just because you're busy with work.
Helen would point out every little thing with a disapproving look, and I finally spoke up. Actually, Aiden was the one who cleaned the bathroom and hung up the laundry.
Oh, come on, Mom. Kate's trying her best. Give her a break.
Aiden would cut me off smiling.
You'll get the hang of it eventually and be as perfect as mom.
Well, I guess I have to be patient. Young people these days cut corners so easily.
After Helen retreated to her room, I confronted Aiden. I'm so sick of the daily passive-aggressive comments. Can I explain to her that we're splitting the chores?
If she finds out her darling son is being forced to do housework, she'll flip out.
I couldn't believe how old-fashioned he was. Besides, we agreed that we'd each spend time in our own spaces except in emergencies. But Helen's acting like this is her house, walking around wherever she wants. She even goes into our bedroom without asking.
What's the big deal? It's no problem.
No matter how much I complained, Aiden didn't care, and my protests were always ignored. As Helen realized Aiden was on her side, she became bolder and more intrusive. While I was out, she'd rummage through my shoes and closet, borrowing clothes without asking, then go off on trips or to see shows. Helen, who has a fuller figure, would wear my slim-fitting clothes, making her look like a stuffed sausage, but she was perfectly pleased with herself. Naturally, my clothes would come back with hooks and buttons popped off and the fabric torn. I protested to Helen, saying, "Please stop," but she ignored me. When I tried to discuss it with Aiden, he suddenly had more overtime or business trips and wouldn't pay me any attention.
Family members or sisters often share clothes, right? It's like we're a close-knit family, which is nice.
But as I tried to push back, Aiden furrowed his brow and cut me off.
I'm busy training our interns at work. Don't bother me too much.
While I was struggling with this, one day I got a call from Hillary inviting me to lunch. When I first met Hillary, we quickly bonded over our shared love for the same anime, as we discovered through our phone screens, and we became friends. Since then, we've been having lunch together or going to events like close friends. That weekend, I met Hillary at a cafe and told her about Helen, and Hillary frowned deeply.
I'm sorry our mom is causing you so much trouble, Kate.
Please don't apologize, Hillary. I'm just not handling it well. Hillary furrowed her brow and shook her head.
She looks down on those in weaker positions, like daughters or daughters-in-law, but she's always doted on Aiden.
She propped her chin on her hand, staring into the distance.
Aiden was pampered just because he's a man. He was forgiven for anything and always got special treatment.
Is that so? Hillary spoke with a voice full of frustration.
I wasn't allowed to attend cram school or take extracurricular activities, and our parents didn't pay for my college. So I studied desperately and went on to college with a scholarship. But Aiden was enrolled in a prestigious prep school and went to the private university he wanted.
Hillary spoke in a gloomy voice, concluding with a sigh.
I'm happy that you become my sister-in-law, but I wouldn't recommend marrying Aiden. Oh, wait, you've already registered, haven't you?
Yes, our wedding is in 6 months. Hillary frowned and muttered.
I wouldn't want a mother-in-law like that. No way I'd live with her, not even for money.
I nodded at Hillary's words, but I didn't have the courage to break off my engagement to Aiden. I had already asked a colleague to give a speech at the wedding, and the invitations had been sent out. Besides, if I said the reason for breaking off the engagement was because I didn't get along with Helen, it would just seem like a selfish excuse. 6 months later, still smoldering with anxiety, I got married. During the ceremony, the congratulatory messages from the guests, the glittering scenes, and the smiles of my mom and friends lifted my spirits, allowing me to forget my frustrations with Aiden and Helen for a while. Helen also put on a pleasant front in front of me and the relatives, being unusually kind to me as if all her past snide remarks were lies. That evening, after cleaning up dinner and taking a bath, I was reading in the bedroom when Aiden called me downstairs. When I went to the living room, Aiden and Helen were both waiting with meaningful smiles on their faces. I was startled when I noticed the paper in Aiden's hand. "Hey, why are you holding a divorce paper?" What Aiden was holding was a signed divorce paper. Without answering my question, Aiden twisted his lips and spoke to me.
You ratted out me and Mom to Hillary at the cafe, didn't you?
Surprised by his harsh tone, which was so different from usual, I looked at Aiden's face. "What?"
Mom was sitting at a nearby table.
Seeing me gasp, Helen shrugged her shoulders.
It's embarrassing for a wife to talk about private family matters with others.
"I'm sorry, but she's not an outsider. She's your daughter." Ellen opened her eyes wide and shouted,
A daughter who's married off is no longer part of my family.
As I stood speechless, overwhelmed by Helen's intensity, Aiden and Helen looked me up and down as if appraising me.
Well, we've watched you for a while, but this won't work. What do you think, Aiden?
I agree. She's not suitable for the Murphy family.
In shock, I looked back and forth between Aiden and Helen. We just had our wedding, and now they're saying this?
That's right. We need to train her quickly. I don't want to be embarrassed in the future.
Exactly. We need to fix her attitude so she won't dare to talk back to us.
After that ominous conversation, Aiden glared at me with sharp eyes and coldly declared,
If you ever defy us, I'll divorce you anytime. Remember that.
Aiden put the divorce papers in the drawer of the bedroom dresser, then laughed with Helen as they left me standing there in shock and moved to the living room. Worried about Helen and Aiden's behavior, I spent a sleepless night. I woke up the next morning feeling heavy-hearted, but I didn't want to start the first day of our marriage with a gloomy face. I washed my face, tried to lift my spirits, and started preparing our breakfast. After a while, Helen in her pajamas and Aiden, now changed into his dress shirt, appeared in the living room. Both of them yawned loudly and stretched as they sat down at the table. Aiden, good morning. Helen, good morning to you too. Breakfast is almost ready.
Silence.
I greeted them cheerfully, but for some reason, there was no response. Aiden turned the pages of the newspaper, while Helen sat on the sofa and began watching the morning news on TV. Maybe they didn't hear me, I thought, and continued to prepare breakfast. Helen, would you like sausages or bacon with your eggs? Even when I called out loudly, there was still no response. It's not like they suddenly went deaf. As I stood there puzzled, Helen turned to Aiden with a smile and started talking to him.
Aiden, look at this dog. It looks like cotton candy. So cute.
What? Are you saying you want a dog again? You know I'm not good with dogs.
Helen teased Aiden, who was pouting.
Big guy like you, and you're scared of a puppy? That's hilarious.
Shut up.
The two laughed together, clearly enjoying themselves. Sorry to keep you waiting. I placed breakfast on the kitchen counter, and Helen came to the table. They toasted some bread, put some fried eggs on plates, and finished their breakfast while chatting. I felt an overwhelming sense of discomfort at their behavior. These two were pretending not to hear me, avoiding eye contact as if I didn't exist. They acted as if I wasn't there, talking and laughing as they ate together. After finishing their meal, Helen and Aiden left for work and a walk, respectively. I went to work with a heavy heart, and during lunch, a realization hit me. What Aiden meant by teaching you a lesson so you can't talk back was this. Helen and Aiden were both ignoring me. I laughed at how childish it was. Surely they'd tire of this schoolyard game soon and start talking to me again. But the situation dragged on much longer than I expected. Even as the months changed and the seasons moved from spring to summer, Helen and Aiden continued to ignore me completely. If it were just Aiden, it wouldn't have hurt so much. But seeing Helen and Aiden happily conversing while I was left out hurt deeply. Whether they were together or apart, they both consistently ignored me. I tried desperately to engage them, plastering on a smile and talking to them daily. Today didn't work out, but tomorrow they'll probably talk to me, even if it's with an annoyed expression. This self-reassurance before bed became my nightly routine. I even began to miss Helen's snide remarks. Aiden, what would you like for dinner tonight? Fish or meat?
Silence.
Hey, say something. Aiden remained silent. Why are you ignoring me? Tell me the reason. How long do you plan to keep this up? Even when I pleaded with a desperate voice, he ignored me completely. So I turned to Helen. Helen, if I've done something wrong, I'll fix it. I'll even apologize for complaining to Hillary. Just please talk to me like before. I swallowed my pride and tried to get through to Helen, but she wouldn't acknowledge me. Eventually, my nightly routine turned into negative thoughts. I was ignored again today. Tomorrow will be the same. I became overwhelmed with a sense of helplessness. It became pointless to keep hoping, so I told myself I was like air. They couldn't see me, and it was only natural they wouldn't pay attention to me. Telling myself that seemed to ease the sting of rejection a little. By the time we had been married for 6 months, I had drastically reduced the time I spent at home on weekends. I'd quickly finish the housework, prepare meals for Helen and Aiden, and then spend the rest of the day at an internet cafe. This was the only way I could prevent myself from breaking down completely. Watching them enjoy each other's company made my stomach twist with pain. What's the point of me being in this house? Since our marriage, Aiden had dumped all the household chores on me, so I guess I'm just the ADM and servant here. At work, I could forget about it, but as the end of the day approached, my chest tightened and my heart pounded with anxiety. There were times on the train home when I felt so trapped that I rode all the way to the end of the line, contemplating just disappearing. Should I just get a divorce? But getting divorced after only 6 months of marriage would be embarrassing in front of my mom and relatives. That morning, I was trying to focus on my computer work, hoping to forget about the harassment from Aiden and Helen. Then a call was transferred to me from the operator. It was Helen. After ignoring me for 6 months, what did she want now? I felt a surge of anger. I thought about hanging up, but decided to answer in case it was an emergency. Hello.
Kate, call an ambulance right now.
What? I blurted out in confusion. What's wrong? Can't you call them yourself? I responded coldly, but Helen yelled back.
I fell down the stairs and hurt my back. I can't move. Just call the ambulance.
Is this really the way to ask someone for a favor? I responded, feeling exasperated. Understood. I'll take care of it. But from now on, please call my cell phone. I hung up the phone and called the ambulance for her. I couldn't bring myself to feel any sympathy, given all the resentment I had built up. Later, during my lunch break, my cell phone rang again while I was eating. When I answered, Aiden's voice was filled with anger.
Where are you right now?
I'm at work eating my lunch.
How can you eat when mom is in such a bad state?
Aiden yelled.
Mom broke her lower back. Get to the hospital right now.
I was a bit surprised at how serious the situation was. Wait, so is Helen going to be hospitalized?
No, she's supposed to be treated at home. But she has to stay in bed for 3 to 4 months, so she'll need care.
I see, it's going to be busy. Then Aiden demanded, in an authoritative tone.
So, quit your job and take care of mom.
What? I almost dropped the sandwich I was holding. Aiden continued as if it were the most natural thing in the world.
You'll take care of her until she can move again. It's just helping her walk, assisting her to the bathroom and bath, and helping her change clothes. So it should be easy, right?
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They had ignored me up until this morning, and now they had the nerve to ask such a thing. Suppressing the anger rising within me, I spoke to Aiden. You should be the one taking care of her. She's your mom.
That's a daughter-in-law's duty. I have work to do.
Aiden said, as if it were common sense. I work full-time too.
Anyone can do office work. You're replaceable, so you should quit. Besides, you make less money than I do.
His presumptuous tone made my blood boil. That's not the point.
Stop arguing and get to the hospital. What kind of family doesn't help each other?
Aiden's angry voice made me feel cold inside. This is ridiculous. I'm not some servant you can use for free.
Hey, are you listening? Do your duty as my wife.
I was so furious that I hung up in the middle of his sentence. I stopped eating lunch, went back to work, and requested a week's vacation. Fortunately, it was a slow time at work, so the request was easily approved. I booked a serviced apartment near my workplace, went home, packed my suitcase with my clothes, and left the house. As I burned with rage, I made a vow in my heart. Aiden and Helen, you will pay for trampling on my feelings and treating me like this. The next day, the barrage of phone calls from Aiden and Helen began. Whenever I checked my phone during lunch break or after work, there were dozens of missed calls and messages. Helen, with nothing else to do, would call and send messages at all hours, even in the middle of the night. After ignoring them for 3 days, I finally answered one of Aiden's calls, annoyed by the constant ringing. What do you want?
Where the hell have you been while mom is in such a state? Get back here and do your duty as a wife.
Duty? I played dumb and Aiden exploded.
Of course, taking care of mom. We're struggling without you. She needs help just to go to the bathroom, and helping her bathe is a nightmare. I even have to buy ready-made meals. We're spending extra money on medical bills and renting a care bed, and now this unnecessary expense.
Oh, it sounds tough. Good luck with that.
Why the hell should I be doing this? Get back here and take care of mom. Were you planning to repay our kindness with betrayal?
His absurd words made me want to laugh. When exactly did I receive any kindness from you? All I got were insults, snide comments, and then being completely ignored by both of you. That's what I remember.
Let's just put the past behind us. Don't you understand the spirit of helping each other?
His continued arrogance made my blood pressure rise. You two are so close. Why don't you be the one to support Helen in times like these? Despite my irritation, I said this, and Aiden responded, even more annoyed.
I told you I'm busy. This is a woman's job, isn't it?
He repeated the same line persistently.
Since you refused, I even asked Hillary for help. Poor thing. She had to be dragged into this after we cut ties.
You called Hillary? I asked, surprised, and Aiden explained.
Hillary said it's hard for her to quit her job right away, so she asked for a week. She also needs to discuss it with her husband, Mike.
I see, so Hillary is coming. After thinking it over, I told Aiden, okay, I'll come back home, but I also have work to hand over, so I can't come right away. I'll come with Hillary, so can you manage until then? I said politely, and Aiden responded arrogantly.
Fine, I'll carry it.
Thank you. Of course, I had no intention of quitting my job. I was sure Hillary felt the same way. After hanging up, I immediately called Hillary, and we made a plan. A week later, I returned home with Hillary. When we entered the living room and the adjoining bedroom, we found a recliner set up with Helen lying in it, her back slightly elevated. It seemed she really had fractured her lower back. As soon as they saw us, Aiden and Helen started complaining.
You're making such a big deal over a lousy job. Just come home earlier.
Exactly. What's more important, your job or me? I almost blurted out that of course my job was more important, but I bit my tongue. Hillary, standing next to me, seemed to be thinking the same thing as her cheek twitched.
Sorry for being late, Mom. But isn't it better to move around a bit with a back brace instead of just lying in bed? That would help your recovery, right?
Hillary, who had done her research, carefully chose her words as she spoke to Aiden and Helen.
Mom, you may be on the fuller side, but with Aiden's strong physique, he should be able to take care of you just fine.
As Helen and Aiden remained sullenly silent, I agreed with Hillary. If we put a portable toilet in the living room and place non-slip mats and a shower chair in the bathroom, it should make things much easier. We can also order meal deliveries. Helen responded bitterly.
How can Aiden handle something like toilet care? Taking care of a parent has always been a woman's job.
I felt a wave of exhaustion. Neither Aiden nor Helen seemed willing to change their outdated views.
You've got some nerve.
Hillary glared at Helen and Aiden with angry eyes.
To you and Aiden, I've always been just someone convenient. It's been that way since we were kids. I was always the one who had to sacrifice.
Her voice, filled with bitterness, made Helen and Aiden flinch.
No matter how hard I studied or excelled in sports and received awards, neither Dad nor Mom paid any attention to me. I don't remember ever being praised. They even opposed me going to college. But Aiden got to do whatever he wanted, like baseball and soccer. And when he won tournaments, you took him out for fancy steak?
I didn't mean to spoil him.
Helen stammered, while Aiden laughed incredulously.
Hillary, were you jealous of me? It's only natural that boys are treated better. If you don't like it, maybe you should be born as a man next time.
Then he turned to me, his voice sharp with anger.
By the way, Kate, you're the worst. Leaving home when your family is in trouble, how irresponsible can you be?
His words struck a nerve, and I shot back. That's my line. Why don't you take care of your own parent when you live together? Why make your sister or wife do it? We're not free servants, you know?
What? You, a woman, dare to talk back to me?
Aiden's eyes narrowed as he growled in a menacing tone.
You became part of this family, didn't you? So you should be more obedient. You should be grateful you even got to marry me.
That's right. We're supposed to help each other in times of need. Family cooperation is key.
Helen chimed in with a smirk, and Hillary and I exchanged glances. That's a fine sentiment. But Aiden, you were complaining about how mom's care was an extra expense.
What? I would never say something like that.
Really? You forget what you said so easily? How pathetic. I chuckled, pulled out my phone, and pressed play on the recording app.
I even have to buy ready-made meals. We're spending extra money on medical bills and renting a care bed. And now this unnecessary expense.
Oh, it sounds tough. Good luck with that.
Why the hell should I be doing this?
Helen shot a sideways glance at Aiden, who had gone pale.
So that's what you really think, huh?
But it's a woman's job, right? This has nothing to do with me.
It has everything to do with you. You're my son, aren't you?
Helen pointed out, making Aiden shrink even further. By the way, Helen, can I ask you something? I smiled at the fuming Helen.
What is it?
When you say we should help each other, does that mean it's okay to dip into your son's savings if you need some extra cash?
What?
Aiden's eyes widened in shock, and Helen froze behind him. You didn't know? A big chunk of your savings has been withdrawn. I opened the drawer in the bedroom dresser, took out Aiden's bank statement, and spread it out on the table. Seeing the account balance reduced to just a few dollars, Aiden was visibly shaken.
Was it you, Mom? I told you not to worry about living expenses since you're on a pension, and I even give you $500 a month for spending money.
Trips, concerts, shows, and merchandise. All that must cost a lot of money. I handed Aiden the receipts I had found in Helen's room earlier.
$500 for a hotel, $300 for a show ticket, $1,000 for merchandise. That's way too much.
Ellen immediately looked displeased.
My friend, the CEO's wife, gets an allowance of $1,000 a month. I want that much too.
But racking up $10,000 in debt on someone else's card is absurd.
Wait, $10,000.
Aiden's eyes widened as he looked at the credit card statement I handed him. Then he stared up at the ceiling in disbelief. He must have neglected to check it since he rarely used that card. Ignoring Aiden, Helen voiced her dissatisfaction.
You're such a stingy wife. We spent so much money on Aiden's education, college, and extracurricular activities, so I deserve to get something in return.
What do you mean, so much money? Besides, Mom, you were a housewife. It was Dad who paid for all that. I'm grateful, but that's a separate issue. Use Dad's inheritance.
That money ran out a long time ago.
Helen said nonchalantly. Aiden turned pale, then his face flushed red as he scolded Helen in a harsh tone.
What? You blew through all $300,000. That's impossible. Wait a minute. Half of that was mine.
I'll pay it back, eventually.
Even Helen looked uneasy as she glanced at Aiden, whose face twisted in anger. He clutched his head, then sank to his knees with a pathetic look on his face.
What do I do? I was counting on that inheritance to pay off the other credit card debt.
Suddenly panicking, Aiden stood up as soon as our eyes met. He grabbed my arm tightly and started babbling with bloodshot eyes.
Kate, you'll help me out, right? We're family after all. We should support each other in times like this.
Support each other? What do you mean? I asked coolly, and Aiden, still laughing nervously, made a ridiculous proposal.
You've been saving since before we got married, right? You must have a decent amount by now. So, pay off the debt for me. I know you make less than I do, but you've got enough saved up.
I felt a headache coming on. Had he forgotten everything he'd put me through? I refuse, I said flatly, making both Aiden and Helen's eyes go wide.
What? How can you be so cold? That's why I don't like you.
You're turning down my request. How dare you as my wife?
Aiden started shouting, but I responded calmly. You and I are strangers now.
What?
I already signed and submitted the divorce papers I found in the drawer. Here's the confirmation. Aiden snatched the confirmation from my hand, and he and Helen huddled together to look at it, trembling.
You went and did something so stupid. This has to be a joke.
Is this a joke too? I placed a receipt from a hotel that I found in Aiden's study on the table, and Aiden froze.
How did you?
A message from your mistress came through on the phone you left on the sofa. I showed Aiden the saved message on my phone, and his face fell.
Aiden, the resort hotel trip was so much fun. By the way, when are you going to leave your wife? I can't wait to get married.
I want to be with you too, Julia. But my mom broke her lower back, so it might have to wait a little longer.
Julia replied with an annoyed emoji, and Aiden had added an apologetic one.
Kate, you shouldn't be making such a fuss over an affair.
Helen sighed, but when I showed her the rest of the message, her expression changed.
Oh? No way I'm dealing with caregiving.
Don't worry, I won't make you. Once my mom recovers, I'll kick her out of the house.
Well, that's a relief. I'd hate to live with her.
Helen shook with rage.
What? You're kicking me out? You care more about your mistress than your mom?
Shut up. I've let you stay here long enough. You should be satisfied by now.
Aiden snapped back, glaring at Helen. The two of them stared each other down. Hey Aiden, why did you even marry me? I asked, and Aiden responded nonchalantly.
Your looks. You're pretty enough to match me, and you have a good figure too.
So why did you cheat on her so soon after you got married?
She's younger and more my type. Can't help it.
Aiden leaned back, acting smug. It finally made sense to me. That's why he didn't feel any guilt teaming up with Helen to ignore me after we got married. Taking a deep breath, I turned to Hillary with gratitude. Thank you, Hillary. I've got Aiden's confession recorded, so now I can file for alimony. Helen and Aiden's eyes widened in shock.
Wait a minute. Not only did you file the divorce papers behind my back, but now you're demanding alimony too?
I didn't do anything wrong. I absolutely refuse to pay.
I was utterly disgusted that, even at this point, they showed no signs of remorse. Feel free to refuse. Oh, and by the way, I sent a recording of your abusive words to the manager's wife, including the part about your affair and harassing the interns. Aiden and Helen blinked in shock, their faces turning pale.
The manager's wife. You know her?
Did you forget? She was the instructor at the cooking class where we met. Aiden finally realized what I meant, and he was at a loss for words. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She was furious that you humiliated her. She said she'd report everything to the manager right away. You might lose your job. Helen let out a scream and grabbed my sleeve.
Kate, I'm sorry we ignored you. I was just jealous because I felt like I was losing my son, so I acted out.
Please, Kate, let's start over. If you don't help us, both Mom and I will be buried in debt and end up on the streets.
Aiden pleaded tearfully, clinging to me. I shook off their hands and coldly dismissed them. I don't care what happens to you. You two can work together to pay off your debts. Your family, after all. Then I added, and by the way, this is my house, so I want you out. If you don't leave quickly, I'll have you forcibly removed.
What? I'm injured and you have no heart at all.
Helen whimpered, on the verge of tears, and Hillary joined in.
That's rich coming from you. You used up Dad's inheritance without giving me a single cent, and now you expect sympathy?
I thought you didn't need it.
Helen stammered weakly.
As of today, I'm cutting ties with you as well. Do whatever you want from now on.
Leaving Aden slumped on the floor and Helen sniffling in her bed, Hillary and I walked out of the house. I submitted all the evidence of Aden's affair, along with the recordings of their insults and mistreatment, to my lawyer. When I demanded alimony, they finally gave in and paid the $30,000 in one lump sum. Since they didn't have that much money on hand, they borrowed it. They resisted leaving the house, but when I said, "I'll take this to civil court," they put Helen in a rented wheelchair and moved to a rundown apartment nearby. A few days later, Aden was fired from his jobs. According to the manager's wife, complaints from the interns had been piling up and Aden's dismissal was already in the works. Unhappy with his demotion to a regular employee, Aden lashed out at his junior colleagues and eventually quit. He thought his high education would land him another job at a top company quickly, but being over 40, he struggled to find a full-time position and ended up taking part-time jobs. Aden worked multiple part-time jobs, diligently paying off both his own debt and the debt Helen had accumulated. But he grew tired of Helen, who didn't help with housework and spent her time having fun, leading to a big fight. Helen was eventually kicked out by Aden and called me to hurl insults over the phone.
You're just the ex-wife, but you're really going to leave your mother-in-law in the lurch. Show some gratitude and help me out.
Realizing that reasoning with her was pointless, I blocked both Helen and Aden's contact numbers. I also filed a claim for alimony against Julia, knowing she had been involved with Aden despite knowing he was married. Julia ended up paying me $20,000 in a lump sum and quit her job before moving away. Now that I've cut ties with Aden and Helen, I'm enjoying life with a sense of relief. While I have no intention of ever seeing them again, I still meet Hillary occasionally for lunch or anime events. Although my marriage was a failure, I'm happy to have made a friend who shares my hobbies. From now on, I'm determined to fully enjoy both my work and my personal life.